So she sent me each individual ordinance.
Hey, Spencer.
Yeah.
Okay, so you can go ahead and put it up there at the beginning of the meeting. If anybody chimes in, we will, I will make a decision as far as if they have a question pertaining to the individual legislation or a comment. However, we're not going to wait. If somebody is delayed, then they're going to just be delayed. We'll try to catch up or ask them. But in the interest of time, I don't think that we can wait that period of time after every single time somebody says something.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yep.
Because it's a back and forth thing, and that just won't work like council meetings. You can't go back and forth and have that time delay.
Sure.
Hi, fellas.
Hi, Don.
Hey, Don.
Hey, Don. Don, I was telling Spencer, I'm limiting on my finance any discussion from like the audience, because if we have to wait a delay for every single back and forth, there's no way we'll get through committees.
Right. I think the only discussion will probably be safety, maybe. And maybe not. But
Yeah, even with that, you can't do a back and forth.
No, there just have to be, I'll probably just have to do one question or something along those lines.
Yeah.
I mean, we don't have to do any discussion at all, but I think we should at least try to maybe limit it to one question or one comment or whatever they have.
They just shut it down in here, Bill. I don't think anybody can hear anything right now, D.
Yeah, I can hear.
Can you hear? Can
We
you hear
can.
D?
No, D's muted.
She's muted.
Yeah, I'm asking her to hit a button right now to unmute herself.
Okay. I've got her on a different computer tonight than I have in the past.
She should have a pop-up on her thing asking her to unmute herself.
Is there a pop-up that comes up says unmute? Maybe you just want to hear with me tonight. Go that way. What committee are you on, Dave? Street, okay. No problem. Bill, I got it. Yeah, no problem.
Are we streaming live, Spencer?
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Dawn, are you talking to us?
We're streaming live right now, Spencer.
Yeah, it's live now.
Okay. Well, this was not exactly the plan for the first meeting back at council.
Okay, can you remove that so I can see my participants? I mean, I can see who's on there, but. All right, we are going to call the Finance Committee meeting to order. It is July 6th, 2020. Present are council members Lang, Harris, Bub, Blake, and Marmee. Let me just verify one thing. Yeah, around there. All right, first item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $15,382.55. $13,382.55 is from Holiday Bank Fire, $2,000 for quartermaster. Who's speaking?
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Director.
this is, I'm submitting this for Barb Gilks, but this is a supplement to both of these accounts for the safer firefighters.
I'll offer a motion. Second.
I have a motion by Bub, second by Lang. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $12,000.
Mr. Chair,
Yes, Director.
this is a supplement to our credit card processing account that we've had overwhelming success in obtaining payments through credit cards. We are a victim of our own success in this instance. We need more money placed into this account.
We can't hear you, Director Baum.
Hey, Doug, can you hear me? I'll jump in.
Yeah,
Doug, you can hear me? Okay.
yes, we can.
We've had good success with the credit cards, And in our budget this year, we didn't put enough money in the budget to cover some of the fees that are associated with credit cards and processing. We're just asking to have some additional dollars moved into that account so we can cover the fees and the costs of the credit cards.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Lang. Any questions and or discussion? I do have a couple questions. I asked that, we know what we're going to do in order to pay for these things, because this is just an additional expense. It doesn't appear that we're getting more payments. It just seems that people now are aware of the credit cards. So we're paying high fees in order for folks to use credit cards, but the city is going to be, it's going to reduce the amount of EMS dollars that we're going to get. And not only that, like this here, we're actually bringing out from the unappropriated balance. So we're going to have to budget for this out of the EMS in the future, and that's going to reduce the amount that we get in. So
Doug,
what are we going to do about it?
You're right about that. And one of the things we're going to check on, if you look at the county, if you go online and you pay your property taxes and say you pay them with a credit card, they charge a fee to do that. That's one of the roads we're going to run down to see if we can charge that fee for people who want to use the credit cards. That way it's not an impact to the general fund.
Right. And that's what we need to, if we're going to offer credit card services, we need a way to pay for it without it coming from taxpayer dollars.
I think we're on the same page there, Doug.
Yeah. And because this $12,000 is just coming from our unappropriated balance. The other thing is just knowing how to send that to the community in a more positive manner. The way that you approach it is you say that they get a discount if they do not pay for a credit card.
That's
You
something
say
we'll
what the
have
fee
to.
is, and then you say it's a discounted rate.
I got you.
So basically, you include the cost of the credit card in all charges, and then if they don't pay with a credit card, then they get a discounted rate versus saying you have to pay a fee to pay for to use a credit card.
Right. And we'll travel that
Jonathan?
road.
Yeah, I think you have to do that per the credit card agreements. You usually can't charge a fee for credit card. You have to do a discount, a cash discount if they pay without a credit card, like you were saying, Doug.
Yeah, it's not a road we've traveled down. It's a road we're discussing.
Well, here's the thing. I'm not going to support this on full council, and because I asked Director Baum to make sure that we have something ready, so then we know, because
And Doug, he might have.
You guys, yeah.
He might have. Him being cut off from this is something that was unexpected. So I'm just trying to answer a few questions that I'm aware of.
Okay. Yeah, well, we definitely need to find that out. I'll support it to go to full council, but I made it clear that we should probably have a game plan moving forward, because this is just a portion of the year. We don't know how much this is going to just skyrocket even more, because especially folks, they like to use their credit cards to get those points and rewards
They
and
love the
things.
points, don't
And
they?
who pays for it? Yeah, who pays for it is the people that ends up, allowing the credit card.
We'll circle back with you on it.
Okay, thank you. Any additional questions?
Where's old Bomber at?
Seeing
Can you
none,
hear me
all
now?
those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation in the amount of $93,667.
Mr. Chair, can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay. So this is the city match for the SAFER grant for new firefighters.
Okay. Any questions?
I'll make a motion.
Second.
Motion by Lang. Who seconded? Bob?
Yes.
Any further questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $24,000.
Mr. Chair, this is a payout for firefighter Thaddeus Webster. He has retired in good standing, and this is his payout.
Okay.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Motion by Bob, second by Lang. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $8,500.
This is a payout for retired police officer Earl Rowe. Don't pay any attention to the numbers next to termination, sick, vacation, and comp. It's $8,500, but the numbers are duplicates from the previous payout.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
I have a motion by Bub, second by Lang. Can you clarify that? So the total is 8,500, right?
Correct. It's 4,500 sick, 3,000 vacation, and 1,000 comp. But in the graph box down below account description and the amount, those are repeats from Thaddeus Webster's. But if you look at
Okay.
section 5, it's correct.
Okay, I got you. All right, then she'll just have to correct that on her paperwork. Mr. Lang?
Yeah,
You have
I
a
was
question?
just going to ask if we wanted to make a motion to amend to correct that, or if we just want to have Janine fix it on the next round.
It just needs to be fixed. It's correct actually in the form
The
that was
appropriation.
requested. It's just
Yeah.
like a typo.
Okay.
Yeah. Any further questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor by thumbs up. Those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount $16,100.
This is a retirement payout for the retiring Detective Secretary Sherry Caudell.
I'll offer a
Okay.
motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. All those opposed, same sign. Motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for appropriation amount of $165,842.22. Is anybody going to speak on the JED Z?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I can go ahead and speak to that. That is our second quarter collections for the JED Z. It just gets distributed to about 6 different entities. And that is to cover those costs from the JED Z 1, where Prologis is located.
I'll offer a motion.
Second.
Motion by Bub, second by Lang. Any questions and or discussion? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. All those opposed, same sign. That motion passes 5-0. Next item on the agenda is a request for legislation to provide for the issuance of 965,000 of bond anticipation notes in anticipation of the issuance of bonds for the purpose of paying a portion of the city's costs and a portion of the property owner's costs in anticipation of the levy and collection of special assessment for Horns Hill Road sanitary sewer project improvements and declaring an emergency.
This particular note
Any questions?
is coming due in September. And the assessments have not been collected yet. So the note needs to be renewed for another 90 days.
I'll entertain a motion.
Yeah, I'll make a motion.
Motion by Lang,
Second.
second by Harris. Any questions and or discussion?
Mr. Chairman, I will abstain from this.
Okay. Any further questions or discussion? So Steve, we're just pushing this out 90 days. Now the assessment, isn't that actually done on their property taxes, or do we do that somehow?
There's a period for direct collection where you can pay without being assessed. That can be done at any time. That's what's not complete yet. So what will happen then is once we know how much we've already collected, then we will sell a note for the balance. Then
Okay.
as assessments are paid through the real estate tax, it'll be put in the fund to retire this.
Gotcha. Okay, makes sense. Thank you. Any additional questions? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. Mr. Bub is going to abstain, and any opposed, thumbs up. So that motion passes 4-0. And with that, the Finance Committee meeting stands adjourned.
Worker, Blake. Bob, is Ryan here? Ryan, Bob? You turned your video on? We'll hold here for just a minute for Mr. Bud to join us. There he is. All right, we'll call the Service Committee meeting to order. Those present are myself, Rath, Harris, Barker, Blake, and Bub. Up first, discuss ordinance number 20-18, an ordinance changing the zoning classification of certain real property generally described as 44 North Westmore Avenue, City of Newark, Licking County, Ohio, from that of GO General Office District to MB Medium Intensity Business District, zoning code of the City of Newark, Ohio. Mr. Rhodes, are you speaking on that? Or Mr. Moorhead?
I'll speak to it.
Who said that? Brian.
Brian.
Brian Moorhead. you
Yeah,
have
this-
the floor.
This is just a request we've gotten in from the property owner there at 44 North Westmore. The request is to change the zoning on the parcel that he has there.
I'll offer a motion.
Motion by Bub,
Second.
seconded by Harris. Obviously, this will go on to Planning Commission. And they'll come back with a recommendation. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor of forwarding this on, signify with thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. Seeing none opposed, this will pass on with a vote of 5-0. Up next will be ordinance number 20-19, an ordinance consenting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being approximately 0.29 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Chairman,
Yes, Mr. Sassen.
I can speak to this legislation and the next three pieces as they are all together. You will note that 20-19 and 20-20 are mirror opposites of each other. This is that standard procedure we go through with annexations that allows council to have a meaningful opportunity to object if they wish. Coming out of committee, you can vote yes on both 19 and 20. When we get to council, obviously you can't vote yes on both. 20-44 and 20-45 are also companion pieces to this annexation, which are required by statute. I'd ask that committee pass all four pieces on to council for consideration. It's a single family home annexation in the city, a fairly standard procedure that we follow on a fairly regular basis.
Enough. So if we are opposed to this, now is not the time to express that opposition. Rather wait until it gets to council when we get to vote on.
Yeah, from a voting standpoint, that's correct. I think we need to let both of the first two pieces of legislation go to council so that if there is a meaningful objection, if there is some basis to oppose this, both pieces of legislation are before council to consider. And then when they come up again at council, I'll refresh everyone's memory again.
Fair enough. Any questions or comments on 20-19?
I'll offer a motion.
We have a motion on the floor by Bub,
Second,
seconded by
Parker.
Parker. Any other questions, comments, concerns? Seeing none. All those in favor signify by thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. That motion will carry forward 5-0. Up next is the mirror ordinance number 20-20, an ordinance objecting to the annexation of certain territory generally described as being 0.29 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township to the city of Newark, Ohio, and declaring an emergency. Questions or comments about this, Mr. Sassen?
I'd just like to add, Mr. Chairman, because I know that this is a concern of yours regularly. All four of these pieces of legislation have the emergency clause on there. This annexation petition was actually filed like the day we went into quarantine. And so it has been on hold for a period of time as a result of the state's orders in the quarantine. But now that we're moving the process forward, I think it's important that we keep the emergency provision in there because we are subject to response deadlines on this process imposed by the Ohio Revised Code. So despite the fact that it was delayed by the quarantine, and now that we have it back on the table, I feel it's important that we continue to move it forward according to the statutory timeline, and that's why the emergency is attached to all four pieces.
Thank you for addressing that. I was going to ask that question and I just forgot on the last piece of legislation. So thank you for knowing me. With that said, how does this change the procedure? I know it goes from here. It's going to go to Planning Commission. I agree. No.
Annexations don't go to Planning Commission. This will come to council for a reading at the next meeting. If council accepts this, it then gets sent back to the county commissioners. And then it will come back to us again for a final acceptance of the property. But it's an expedited 2 annexation. It has very tight deadlines that sometimes are difficult to meet. It's just weird on this one because it was basically put on hold because of the quarantine. Had we not had a quarantine, this would have resolved itself by the end of March or early April. But again, I just think that because we have this back on the table, we should follow the rules because they're there and because we probably owe it to the applicant.
Fair enough. Any other questions or comments about this ordinance?
I'll offer a motion.
We have a motion on the floor by Bub,
I'll second it.
seconded by Barker. Any other questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by a thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. This ordinance will pass forward with a vote of 5-0. Up next, resolution number 20-44, a resolution adopting a statement indicating what services, if any, the city of Newark, Ohio will provide for approximately 0.29 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township, a territory proposed for expedited 2 annexation and declaring an emergency.
I'll offer a motion.
Motion by Bub,
Second.
second by Barker. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. This motion will be carried forward with a vote of 5-0. Up next will be resolution number 20-45, a resolution regarding a buffer zone for the annexation of approximately 0.29 acres, more or less, located in Newark Township and declaring an emergency. Any questions or comments?
I'll offer a motion.
Motion by Bub,
Second.
second by Barker. Any questions or comments? Seeing none, all those in favor signify by a thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. This resolution will be carried forward with a vote of 5-0. Up next, resolution number 20-46, a resolution authorizing and directing the mayor and auditor to take all steps necessary to request such funds as may be available from the county coronavirus relief distribution fund under the Coronavirus Aid, Relief, and Economic Security Act, CARES, and to expand such funds only to cover costs consistent with Section 5001 of the CARES Act and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Chairman, I can speak to this.
Mayor?
This is money that was put in place by Congress, the United States Congress. It was kind of funneled through the states to add a few more requirements on it. And now will be distributed to us through the county auditor. It is based on the local government funds formula, and it will be, this piece of legislation has to be passed for us to be able to access it. Once it is passed, that money will be deposited into an account that we can use to cover any COVID-related charges from March 1st until December 30th, but has to be encumbered by October 15th. It cannot be a budgeted item and it can't be revenue replacement, but it surely can cover any of the modifications we have done in chambers. I've set in on a few. The Office of Budget Management with the state does oversee it. I've set in some seminars and talked with the budget manager, director. And so again, there's no obligation on our side. There's no downside to it. And any unused funds we will have to return at the end. So, but again, this legislation has to pass before we have any access to it.
Fair
Mr.
enough.
Chair, I'd offer a motion.
Motion by Barker,
I'll second that. I have a question as well.
second by Bub. Mr. Bub, your question.
Yes, Jeff, who with the city is going to be administering this project, document all the numbers and so forth?
We're
We're going to do that through the auditor's office. I had our first initial conference webinar. I had Lori Resta set in on it. So we maintain our own receipts. We do not have to submit receipts. It is not reimbursable type grant money. Obviously, it will be for anything we spend up till the time we get the money deposited. But from then on, we can take a draw on it. We make any draws we want. We keep our own receipts. And at the end of the day, we have to be tidy in case we have an audit from the state, or quite honestly, the feds could audit it too. But it'll be all maintained. I'm going to stay on top of myself, and certainly we'll do it in conjunctions with the auditor's office. Not unlike anything else they would do, as they maintain receipts for any expenses that we have throughout the city.
Mr. Mayor, I have a question for you. In the ordinance, it says the mayor and auditor, authorizing and directing the mayor and auditor. In your opening statement, you mentioned that this was controlled by you and the Licking County auditor. I guess
It's not, the expenditure side will be between myself and Steve Johnson and of course his office. But the distribution side, the governor decided to distribute it to the 88 counties through the county auditor. And it's just really a procedures. It's setting there by the county auditor. Once we give the necessary paperwork, but it includes this, have an account set up and this, then they will transfer that money into an account we will maintain separately and separate accountability. So it's kind of the access to the funds come through the county auditor. The expenditure of the funds will be watched by myself and Mr. Johnson.
All right, Mr. Sasson, I see you popped back on here. Do we need to specify that that's the city auditor, or are we good the way the legislation reads now?
This language is essentially borrowed from suggested language from the state and the federal government. It doesn't need to clarify that. They want the mayor and the auditor both represented in the legislation because the auditor essentially writes the checks and balances the checkbook. And so that's why both names are on there. So I don't think any change needs to be made in that regard.
Yeah, Mr. Chairman, I might just add to, there were 3 templates provided through this course, through the Ohio Municipal League and through the Office of Budget Management for the state. One template was for municipalities like ourselves. One template was for townships, and the other template was to be used for counties because Licking County gets some of the funds too. So this is a standard template that I forwarded up to Mr. Sasson's office for normal form preparation. And okay, we didn't make any changes to it other than, of course, inserted the city of Newark in as needed.
Good enough. Thank you. Any further questions or comments? You hear a motion? Or has that already been, actually, we already had a motion by Barker, and who seconded that? Seconded by Bub. No further questions or comments. All in favor of sending this forward, signify with a thumbs up. All opposed, same sign. This legislation will be moving forward with a vote of 5-0.
Thank you.
Thank you. That concludes the Service Committee. Up next will be the Street Committee.
If you're here for Street City, please turn your camera on for me.
So
You can talk. You are.
I can talk
Yep.
by the bar.
You don't have to push bar. You're unmuted.
I'm sorry.
You are unmuted. You're good.
Oh,
You just speak. They're going to say that right.
hi, Sean.
All right. I'm sorry.
Okay.
All right, so I'd like to call this meeting of the Streets Committee to order. Those in attendance are council members Hall, Blake, Rath, Labutus, Lang, Marmee, and myself, Fennell. Tonight, we will be discussing ordinance number 20-21, an ordinance vacating a portion of a 12-foot alley as shown on the plat of the Williams C. Melhomes subdivision of outlot number 66 of Bradley Buckingham's addition in the town of Newark as recorded in Plat Book 2, page 184 of the Licking County Plat Records. Said alley is located at the rear of properties at 206, 208, and 210 Eddy Street. Mr. Moorhead, the floor is yours.
Thanks. I'm going to speak on behalf of the property owner at 210 Eddy Street. who is stuck out of the country and emailed the petition into us. So that's the reason why he's not available to speak at the meeting tonight. But basically, there's an alley at the rear of these three properties, and the alley at that location is actually 24 feet wide. So 12 feet of it that's abutting the rear of 206, 208, and 210 Eddy Street is what's being requested for vacation. And if you look on one of the aerial photos, I think I submitted that along with the package. But if you look on the aerial photos, the house at, there's a garage at the rear of 206. And then there's a house, small house on the rear of the lot at 210 Eddy Street that encroaches into that alleyway. So the owner of 210 Eddy would like to split that lot, sell the house separately, the house on the front of the lot separately from the house on the rear of the lot. But the problem is the house on the rear of the lot is partially in the alley. So that's what the reason for the vacation is. If the vacation is granted, we will then grant the lot split. And then that'll allow the property owner to sell both the front and the rear of 210 Eddy Street.
Thank you, Mr. Moorhead. Are there any questions?
I'll make a motion to send this on to council.
Mr. Lang, there's a motion by Mr. Lang. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Who was that?
Second.
Okay. All right. All those in favor of moving ordinance 20-21 onto full council, Mr. Army.
Yes.
Yeah, I have a question. So are you saying that we're only gonna doing half of the alley, or we're gonna do the entire thing?
It's just half of the alley. It's 12 foot of the 24 foot. So there still will remain a 12-foot alley running north-south behind those properties, because there's some properties to the north of these three properties that actually that have garage access. But as you go further north, the alley narrows back down to 12 foot. So the 12 foot will be consistent from south to north behind these properties. What happened is back in the day, the properties on Central Avenue were platted with a 12-foot alley behind it. And then consequently, the properties on Eddy Street were platted with a 12-foot alley behind it. But unfortunately, the survey was not very good. And I think the surveyor that platted the Eddy Street side thought that he was overlaying the 12-foot alleys, when in real life, they were side by side. So the alley that's platted on the Central Street side, the Central Avenue side, will still remain. And then this portion behind these three parcels is what's being asked for to be vacated.
Thank you.
All right, I just got a message that someone is calling in.
And that's what's on it. And it doesn't appear to be. The alley that's on. There's system for like music on hold till it's done. No, it's all.
So I think we want to ask them to put the YouTube on mute.
Yeah, if you could mute your computer. You wouldn't mind giving us your name and address. The phone number calling in last four is 2213.
Yeah, I have a dumb phone and I have no way to control this thing.
Okay. Did you have a question? Okay, looks like the phone is muted at this point. Spencer, did you mute him or did he mute himself?
I did mute him because of all the background noise because he
Okay.
hadn't responded to the question.
Yeah, okay. So I guess we will continue to move on. Does anybody else have any additional questions? Nope. All right, seeing none, all those in favor of moving ordinance 20-21 on to full council signify with a thumbs up. All right, all
Can
those.
you see me, Sean?
Yes, I can. Thank you, Dee.
Okay.
All right, with that, ordinance 20-21 will be moved on to full council and the streets committee meeting is adjourned. Next up, I believe, is safety.
Sure.
Yeah.
Spencer, I don't know if we want to add a comment there directing folks to mute their computers, but then you may want to also add a comment to suggest that gentleman dial back in they can add, present comments to city council, full council when we vote later on.
Yeah, I'm working on typing that stuff in right now.
Thanks, Spencer. I know it's challenging to participate live while also administering the meeting, so appreciate your work on
Yep, I got it. Right, Bub.
All right, we will call this safety committee to order. Present are council members Blake, Fennell, Barker, Rath, and myself. Tonight we're considering resolution number 20-47, a resolution inquiring on city affairs related to the efforts to address unsheltered homelessness. Mr. Blake, were you going to speak to this?
Yes, Mr. Chair, thank you. Permission to make some comments regarding this.
Yes, sir. Go ahead.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair. The resolution that I brought forward tonight is sort of my hope as members of council to have a discussion on the issue of unsheltered homelessness in our city. I'm seeing this resolution more of a tool to have this discussion more than anything at this point, because I don't think we as a group have had a real discussion about homelessness. And so that's the reason for my intent tonight to bring this forward for us to discuss it. I can only speak from my own experience and hope other members of council can share their own truths related to this topic. But it seems to me that there are residents and businesses and organizations that continue to seek direction on how to best care for the homeless population. The people in our wards and the city call upon us for answers. And just last month in June, at the request of the leaders of the American Legion, I met with three veterans. And it was explained to me that the American Legion itself, well, first, they're celebrating 100 years of excellence in our city. And so the 100-year celebration is a positive moment of service and gratitude to our veterans. But the American Legion, however, is concerned about the homeless individuals that are taking up camp along the railroad tracks, which align the American Legion property on South 6th Street. I've had additional conversations with residents on Western Avenue, Worley Avenue, West Popular Avenue, and Little Texas. And just so that you can have a visual, the key factor for all those streets is that of the listed streets is that the homeless individuals are sleeping along like Raccoon Creek and the South Fork of the Licking River. The West Main Street Bridge, the Jefferson Street Bridge, and Wilson Street Bridge are also discussed spaces along the river where people are calling me or emailing me with concerns. People are basically seeking some direction on what to do with those that are unsheltered. And while some instances are police matters, our police department can't bear the full responsibility of this issue. Also, over the last month and during the health crisis pandemic, questions arose as to hygiene stations for the unsheltered, and White's Field was temporarily used for showering for the unsheltered homeless folks. And I just think that different efforts were put place. I didn't know what the city's role in that was, if we had an official capacity as a city in Newark in those roles. You know, city council unanimously agreed that homelessness is an issue when we appropriated dollars last fall and we put resources forward. And as our city continues to grow, we're going to need to have some structures in place to handle this concern. So I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, for us to have some discussion and conversation tonight regarding this topic. I know earlier this afternoon, Director Rhodes forwarded some information to all of our emails regarding expenses. And so I thank Director Rhodes for that quick response. But I'm just very curious as to how other members of council are handling the calls that they are receiving. And two, I think it would make sense for us to all understand a preferred method of how to take action and handle these conversations with our constituents. And so that's really my intent as to wanting to have the conversation tonight, is to just to have sort of a, what's the general overall approach that people are taking in dealing with these types of calls. I know I can't be the only one receiving these types of concerns. And so I'm just thankful for the time tonight, Mr. Chair.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. I will open the floor to any other discussion for council members that would like to jump in. I know personally, I don't believe, thinking back as you were speaking, Mr. Blake, I can't think of any calls or concerns personally that I've received regarding homelessness or certain areas. That's just, me personally speaking. If I happen to remember one, I would let you know, but personally, I can't think of one where I personally heard of that. Anyone else that would like to speak?
Yeah, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Barker, go ahead, and then Mr. Fennell.
I would echo, Mr. Chairman, your comments as well. I personally have not received any calls regarding homeless issues. As an at-large member, I probably would receive some as well, but I have not for any parts of the city. Most of my calls have been, based on other safety issues. But, I do understand that we do have this group that was formed for the spearheaded by Newark Development Partners. And I think they are, by what we saw today from Director Rhodes and Sherry Hottinger, that information, they are progressing forward in creating a plan with the right people. So I really would push that we continue supporting Newark Development Partners and their mission in getting us a structured plan on how we can help our homeless citizens the best way possible.
Thank you, Mr. Barker. Mr. Fennell, you had your hand raised, and Mr. Rath, I will come back to you, sir.
Yes, I also just wanted to share, speaking on behalf of the 7th Ward, that I have had several phone calls, concerned constituents, some of them repeated, contacting me specifically, and it is again, honestly, about the creek that runs through right under Hudson. We've had quite a few people contact me about people going down into that space, wondering if they could have a fence put up or something like that. I don't think that is the answer. I think that appropriate care is, and I hope that we continue to move forward in that direction and that we're able to continue to have these conversations. I think this is really important for us to keep this on our minds and making sure that we're taking care of all of our citizens.
Thank you, Mr. Fennell. Mr. Rath.
Thank you, Mr. Labutus. I'll echo your comments as well as Mr. Barker's as well. I have not had any calls or emails regarding homelessness. And I'm going to reiterate my conversation and my points and concerns that I had spoke of when we last talked about this issue. And that is, we have a lot of services that are out there. We have a lot of people that are wanting to help. And we have a lot of people doing a lot of things. The biggest thing that we have a problem with is coordinated efforts. And I think what Mrs. Hottinger is doing and the Newark Development Partners is a very forward and progressive step at coordinating efforts so that the right hand knows what the left hand is doing. And I think to throw another hand in a pot, I guess, would be a mistake.
Thank you, Mr. Rath. I am getting a note that we have someone calling in. So if Spencer, if you let them in, please.
Yes, they're in. Your caller number, last 4 digits are 4995. If you can state your name and address for the record, please.
Nancy Waylu,
Nancy,
7441 Stewart Road.
Thank you, Nancy. Go ahead.
Yeah, Nancy Waylu. As most of you know, I have been involved with the Newark Homeless Outreach. I've emailed several of you since the pandemic has started. Mr. Rath mentioned that there's several agencies out there and there's lack of coordination, which I would agree with. Unfortunately, during the pandemic, there were shutdowns. And so there was really a lack of access to hand washing, which I brought up in the past, water, any sort of hygiene other than what the grassroots were doing. Vertical shutdown. They just opened up last week. The main place shut down. They had showers. Cornerstone Outreach shut down. So the Newark Homeless Outreach every Saturday was trying to give out hand wipes, anything we could think of, and gallon jugs of water for folks to stay clean. As far as what the Newark, the task force is doing, I'm not sure if Mr. Rhodes can share with the public what he shared with all of you about the updates and the expenses. It would be nice to know what the task force is doing, since so much money has been put forward. And I know they were talking about using the dollar store also. And according to CDC guidelines, when the pandemic broke, they wanted unsheltered homeless to also shelter in place. That's really difficult when, you're living on basically maybe trespassing on railroad property or other property. They want them to shelter in place so they don't spread the coronavirus, as we all know. Hand washing is huge. Hygiene is huge. But none of these things, in my opinion, have really been looked at by the city or the county for that matter. And I guess I'd like to know what you all feel your responsibility is to these citizens during a pandemic. Thank you.
Thank you, Nancy. Any other comments at the moment? Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess I mean, it's just, do we foresee that the North Development Partners and the others that are working with them what will be sort of the clearinghouse for when I realize some of you are saying that you're not getting calls, but some of us are. And so it's just like, do we send those all to the police, or what is the preferred method as to centralize those? Yes, we have all these services, but it's nice to be able to coordinate some things. So are we foreseeing some type of effort to commonly address these types of concerns? That's the frustration, is because you can call these different agencies and get a runaround on things, but it would be nice to see where we're going. Because when a resident calls and says, "Oh, I have these homeless folks in my backyard," or wherever else, I guess I want to know what would be the preferred thing for me to tell that citizen is what is the direction I'm seeking. So.
Yes, Mr. Rath.
Mr. Chair, I understand that there's organization going on and plans are being made. And I know that we're in a process. I don't believe that it's been completed at this time. But at that point in time, would it be inappropriate? I guess maybe I'm asking Director Rhodes as well. Would it be appropriate to have somebody come in from the Newark Development Partners and just make a simple presentation to Newark City Council, not necessarily a committee, but the council as a whole, as to what the plans are and what we could do to help.
I believe that would be fine. Mr. Rhodes, did you have some insight on that?
Well, the insight I would offer is this: we identified that there was a growing population of homeless people within the city. And then we identified, when I said we, the Newark Development Partners, then we identified a need for a building. So we went out and they found dollars to buy a building. Now we've identified that we need to have some professional guidance on a build out of a building as well as operations of the building. Because, you know, I'll say to you this, I don't believe the city of Newark should operate a homeless shelter, but I think we should be part of a solution. So part of our solution is working with the economic development arm of the city, Newark Development Partners. So we brought a building in, we raised money to have professionals give us guidance on a build out of a building and on how to operate a building. Now, the next challenge is going to be raising the costs to do the build out and who pays for that, and then the operational costs. And that's part of the community discussion that is ongoing at this point. And different groups are being set up to talk about that. To circle back to Jeremy's question, who do you contact? Well, Steve Baum and I are contacted when there is a need. If it's a service need, I'll give you an example, say a abandoned homeless camp that have left trash and feces and really left something unsanitary. What we did just last week is we contacted the health department to make sure it was okay to clean that up. And then we moved forward and we cleaned it up. Now, let me be real clear. It wasn't just off the road. It was back in the woods. Steve gets calls occasionally on a homeless person that needs to be redirected to go to somewhere different. In other words, they might be in an area disturbing people and that might not be the right word, but they might be causing a problem or commotion. The safety department handles that. So you have areas in the city that are actively taking calls and responding to the problems. If you're looking for one point person to be the homeless point person, at this point, we don't have that. That's not a position within the city of Newark, but you do have a service department that is engaged, and you have a safety department that is engaged, and you have the economic development arm of the city, Newark Development Partners, engaged. But the real issues moving forward are going to be after it's identified the cost to build the shelter out, and after it's identified the cost to operate that shelter. The real problem is going to be funding. Who's going to fund the build out of the shelter? Who's going to pay for it? Who's going to pay to operate the shelter on an ongoing basis? What umbrella does that go under? Does that go under United Way? Does it go under Salvation Army? Does it go under a combination of both? Those are all things that are being worked at. It's just not a simple problem, because when you get into a build out of a shelter, you want to be able to accept men, you want to be able to accept women, you want to be able to accept families. And then there's a request out there to accept families with animals. So you have a lot of requests. So I know that we're even looking for a little additional land there in case the building would need to be expanded. But again, after all this is determined, it's going to come down to how is it funded? And that has not been answered yet.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. I received another note. We do have someone that has called in for a comment. Last four digits are 2152. If you could state your name and address for the record, please.
Yes, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes, hi, my name is Leisha Farias, 116 Smithview Drive, Heath, Ohio, or Newark, Ohio. I'm with the Newark Think Tank on Poverty, and we're very concerned with the eviction hearings resuming and without a moratorium on evictions, we know that there is not enough affordable housing in our community, and there is no place to go. And we also know that there was a task force that was put together. We hired consultants. I would like to know what the status of that is, and I believe that process was in place so that we get the adequate expertise in this field, because Newark Development Partners might, know about buildings and economic development, but operating or running a shelter, which in no way will be able to match the scale of the problem that we have in this community and will have, because people are facing unemployment, are facing eviction, et cetera. So it seems like we need to be embracing this at a different level. The scale is much different than before. And I just want to make sure that this shelter and this process going forward is involves the public. It can't just be Newark Development Partners that has a say in this. This affects the public. And I'm also I'm on the St. Teresa of Calcutta, St. Vincent de Paul, and we only deal with homeless. And I believe today, just with our tiny little group, I think we had at least 6 calls for people that are facing homelessness and have nowhere to go. There is nowhere to go, especially with COVID, trying to socially distance, et cetera. So we cannot believe that this shelter, whenever it may come online, is going to be some kind of panacea, because the need is already too great and it's going to get worse with the number of evictions. And I called the city and I talked to municipal court, and she said that in Newark, in Licking County, that you are now doing back-to-back 2 days a week eviction court hearings, and that's just to handle the backload. So I've just noticed in my own neighborhood in Newark that the number of set outs that is increasing, and there is no place to go. So I'm really asking for transparency and interest on the part of the entire city council, whether you are receiving calls or not. This is an enormous problem, and in no way are we equipped to management, and in no way is the Newark Development Partners the proper body to handle this. This is a public issue. Thank you.
Let me speak in, Mark, and to respond to Alicia.
Yes.
Newark Development Partners is trying to help resolve an issue that presented itself to the community. Newark Development Partners does not, in the long term, want to run this facility, operate this facility. We want to be a part of getting the facility together, but it's going to take the entire community to make it a reality. And we're taking small steps, and we've raised a fair amount of money to do those small steps. And we don't look at this as an entire solution. And I think that's why we've had some community discussions to continually talk about it.
Thank you, Mr. Rose. Mr. Lang, you want to make a comment?
Yeah, thanks. I did want to answer the question. No, I have not received any calls related to unsheltered issues in my area of town. Not entirely unsurprising there, but I guess I'm a little frustrated. I think we threw a piece of, I would call it, poorly written legislation on the agenda here tonight, rather than really just try to set up an actual conversation. And so I appreciate the comments. We've had a few folks call in, and I think we should have some other folks here to address. If we want to go back and revisit the work that's been done with the task force, let's ask them to come, and when those questions can be answered. I think we're here talking about a piece of legislation that I think was already answered by Service Director Rhodes with the accounting that we have. Certainly, we'd like some more information, from the group, and I don't think that's unreasonable to ask. But I guess I'd say let's try to put that together in a little bit more organized fashion, so we've got the right folks in the room and all the information that we want to talk about in front of us.
Thank you, Mr. Lang. Anyone else? Mr. Blake.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I found the conversation to be very helpful, and I guess offering the piece of legislation, which I'm not, as you noticed, I haven't even offered a motion to adopt it or move it on to full council, because the intent was to have a discussion, because we have not had a discussion about this issue for a long time, since November of last year. But I'm leaving this discussion very positive, because I'm hearing that my point people, for when I get concerns, because I do get a lot of concerns, is probably because the neighborhoods that I represent are different than other areas of the city. And so I'm hearing that I need to send my request to the service director and safety director together, and that and I do agree with the comments that building the shelter is not going to solve the issues, but this umbrella organization, however it's developed, hopefully will be inclusive of all the entities that are being involved, and will be able to provide services, because we're getting the urgency as to what needs to happen needs to be considered here, because people are dealing with the issue now. And why we can have conversation to debate about where funds are going to come from, who's going to pay for what. I mean, the issue exists today, and so that's sort of the urgency that's going on. But I do agree with Councilmember Rath and Councilmember Lang. I hope that we could get some type of update presented to council, so that we can continue to be a part of the conversation and be included in the conversation. So I would echo, Councilman Rath and Lang and wanting to have some type of update when appropriate in the next few months, hopefully. So with that, I'll yield. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Blake. If we don't have, last call, are there any other comments? I think we've had a good discussion on this. We do have a piece of legislation in front of us, and I would entertain a motion to move on to full council for discussion.
Yeah, I don't think we need to make a motion at this time. I just really wanted discussion more than anything. So thank you, Mr. Chair.
All right, thank you. Then we will not move this legislation onto full council, and that will conclude our safety committee. Next up will be full council at 7 p.m. Thank you very much.